Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you could come tonight. I am Barbara Walsh. I'm the Executive Director of the Rockbridge Area Conservation Council that's hosting this talk tonight. I'm going to take care of logistics, and then Cliff Kirikoff, who's a RACC board member, is going to introduce our wonderful speakers. So as far as logistics go, if you all wouldn't mind muting yourself during the presentation. That'll help with background noise and that kind of thing. And to mute yourself, if you take your cursor down to the lower edge of your screen and go to the mute icon on your toolbar there and click that, that should mute you. Now, we are going to have questions tonight, and I am going to attempt to read them out during the talk. So feel free to enter any questions or comments you have in the chat. And that again is another little icon down in the toolbar. If you don't, when you take your cursor down to the bottom, if you don't see the chat icon, click on the more icon. It says more and 3 little dots. Click on that and it'll give you the rest of the icons that are not displayed. And then you should see chat in that list, and then you can just click on chat that way. And then type in your question, and I will try to get the attention of our speakers and insert the question. We'll also have some time at the end for questions, so either during the talk or at the end is just fine. So I'll turn this seminar over to Cliff Kirikoff, who is hosting tonight and has organized this entire series. Cliff? Oh, you're muted, Cliff. You followed directions, hooray.
I was trying to be good on my good behavior and do the mute. Welcome, everybody. It's great to have you all here tonight and joining in for a really interesting evening. And it ties into a program we'd had a little earlier in the year when we had a discussion or a presentation on regenerative agriculture and the use of composting and things along those lines for regenerative agriculture. So tonight, here we are with composting. We have 2 guest speakers, Barbara Brothers and Mary Satterfield. Barbara actually started the composting program in Staunton, and so it gives us great inspiration to have a neighboring town so successfully doing this sort of community program. Also, Barbara is going to help advise us as to how to go about organizing and perfecting a composting program. So we're really looking forward to her advice. Mary Satterfield is a scientist. She's been a scientist with the federal government, specializing in chemistry and also in project development. And she moved into the Valley to Staunton and has gotten very interested in and active in the composting movement. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Barbara and Mary.
Thank you, Cliff.
Thank you so much. And that's the first thing that I wanted to say is to thank a big thanks to Barbara Walsh and to Cliff Kirikoff and to all the work that you all do for the environment through RACC. It's appreciated because it all makes a difference. So we go on to the next slide, and I'm going to just give you a little bit of history of here about how this started, why we wanted to do it. I was with Shenandoah Green when it first started early 2019, and we worked hard to create a mission and vision statement that said basically that we were trying to create a healthy and sustainable environment in the central Shenandoah Valley. And I kept thinking during those early months, what could I add to that? How could I be someone that started a project that would help that mission and vision be realized? because I'd always cared about the environment a lot and had done what I could as an individual, which is probably true of everyone here, do what you can at home. And but you know that it's such a bigger problem than our little plot that we're working on. And I've been composting for at least 30 years at home, in which I knew helped, but it was a small part of the whole subject of food waste. So that's what brought the idea on, was then I started doing research and reading about other places that that have started composting programs, and they were really my models to get started with. And the Shenandoah Green Board supported this. There's a little concern about would it be financially sustainable? How are we going to do that? And so we just had to work through a lot of different issues and problems to be able to get this in place. But it has been a sustainable project from the get-go, which is great, both in terms of volunteers and the finances. And we also had, as part of our goal, was to educate other people about the issues of food waste, why it's a problem, and how they could address that problem individually. So I'm sure a lot of you know and have done reading about why it is a problem to be adding food waste to our landfill. And it does take up about 1/3 of the landfill, and it cannot decompose in there because it cannot get oxygen. It's smashed between metal and plastic and all kinds of junk that goes into the landfill. And so it starts creating different gases. And the main one that most people know about is methane, which we don't want to be breathing, because it is 84 times more powerful than carbon dioxide over a 20-year period. It just increasingly becomes toxic. So it becomes sort of a whole shift when you decide you want to do a composting project, because you start thinking of food waste as a resource rather than as your garbage, something that actually can turn into some good things for the whole planet. But specifically for any community locally, because it goes back into making our soil better, which makes any food that we're growing in that soil a lot more nutrient rich. And then you're also having the advantage of not breathing methane in your air if you can remove it. Well, obviously we're not able to do 100% removal because we only have a limited number of people that are involved in this program. So how did we start it? So as I said, I did a lot of research into other cities and trying to find cities that were similar size as Staunton, and certainly found large cities like San Francisco, who San Francisco has a required food waste collection in their city, and everybody has their bins that go out front, and they're not supposed to be putting any food waste into their garbage. Las Vegas has a different kind of program. Brooklyn, I'm not sure if theirs is voluntary or not, but there's a pickup, and that's the thing. Some cities have it set up where there's a curbside pickup every week along with your garbage at your house. And some have drop-off locations. Most of them have drop-off locations. In Northern Virginia, they're Fairfax, Falls Church, Alexandria, all have composting programs through their city. Gaithersburg and College Park in Maryland do. So these are places you all know about. There are some other smaller towns, a small town in Illinois called Grays Lake it's less than 20,000 people, but they have required composting. And Oxford, Ohio, the same thing. And you may have heard, because it did make some pretty big news last year, when Vermont, the state, they passed laws that said food waste cannot go into your garbage. And so the different communities, different cities and small towns, they all had to each decide how they were going to go about dealing, with that law to make that happen. So they all have drop-offs, and some of them have curbside pick up as well. And one thing I wanted to mention here in terms of beginning a program like this, it's a huge advantage to be working with a nonprofit like we were with through Shenandoah Green, because you've already got a platform there, people who care about the environment. And you know, a treasurer that can help with pay the bills and all once you've collected, and just have like-minded folks to be able to draw from your volunteers, even though a lot of our volunteers knew nothing about Shenandoah Green and maybe still don't. You know, some participate in their activities and some don't. So it's an interesting group of just different people in the community. But having the Shenandoah Green meetings, at that time we were having monthly or bi-monthly meetings, and that was how we really were able to start talking to people that way. And then we also were, or I was certainly talking to a lot of personal connections that I had. And we spent a few months really getting completely organized for this. And shortly before I was ready to start, early September, I realized that it was very important that I have somebody to co-chair it with me. And Mary had shown a lot of interest, and I asked her if she would do that, and she said she would. So I am no longer actually involved with this. I did it through, I stopped at some point last winter, and Mary took over full-time from that. And now Mary is also moving on to another project dear to her heart. And I'm very involved with Allegheny Mountain Institute in terms of working towards sustainable and regenerative farming. So we do something for a while and then we move on. And but still, it's a very important thing to me, and which is why I've told the people with RACC that I would be very happy to do what I can to help them get one started. So so we're here looking at the next steps. I guess we are, because I don't have quite the same screen. Are we on number 4, Mary? Yes.
I don't know the number, but it says next steps.
Next steps, okay. So before we actually started, we designed these posters and cards, and just cards that we could hand out, but we put posters all around town. And certainly down at the farmers market where we were gonna be starting the program. And we found compostable bags that we would have on our table set up at the farmers market to give out to people so that they could keep their compost in that, or their food waste in that during the week, and then bring it to us on Saturday. At the table, we would have sign up sheets so people could sign up to volunteer at the farmers market compost station, as well as join the Shenandoah Green email list. And as I said earlier, we were certainly able to find plenty of volunteers in all ages, which was nice. And the newspaper, our local paper, was happy to do an article on it. So that came out right about the same time we were starting, and that brought a lot of interest as well. Okay, so on to the next slide. So here's just some nuts and bolts details about how this works. We work through Black Bear Composting, which is located in Cremora, and they have been around for quite a while, but they're really probably at their high point in terms of compost production now. They unfortunately do not come to the Lexington area because they're quite booked further east in Charlottesville and Crozet, Albemarle County, and then Staunton is the furthest west that they go. But they bring a 65-gallon bin. We start off with one bin and moved up very quickly. And you can see what the costs are on that. And so now there are 2 bins for the farmers market when the farmers market is in session, and not when it's in session as well, actually. You can see that and each bin holds quite a bit of compost. It's amazing how heavy they are. So by November, you can see we we'd collected half a ton of waste each month, and now it's 1 ton. 1 ton is a lot of waste, a lot of food waste. And we kept a donation jar on our table the whole time, and we wouldn't ask for a donation. Part of that was the rules for the farmers market. We couldn't really ask for that. So we would just say that we have cost, and we would tell people what the costs were if they asked. And we would say, yeah, if people pay, $2 a week for this, or donate $2 a week for this, that'll cover our cost. Some people can't afford to do that, and that was fine. And some people were happy to give a large donation, which was great. So it was, we didn't get the same amount each week by any means, but we always had sufficient to be able to cover the cost and see what the hours are. And I think that we always had flyers there, and information for the volunteers and for certain questions and with answers that people would ask. And I think that's it for that page. So, Mary.
Okay, so we've been doing this for 18 months. We started on Labor Day weekend in 2019. And so what I'm going to do is take you through these 18 months, every month, one by one. No, just kidding. I'm going to just give an overview. So this is a picture. Most of these, I think, are at the winter compost station. The one in the bottom right is at the farmer's market. And just wanted to point out that you see that there are people there. Some of them have masks, and that was before masks were required. And some of them have masks and they are wearing masks because masks were required, and some of them don't because that was before masks were required. So going through the pandemic has, it resulted in some changes, and we were able to pivot pretty well through that. We started at the Staunton Farmers Market, and here's an example of someone that comes to bring their food waste. And you can see that in the picture on the left, she's holding a yogurt container and dumping her food waste in there. And then often Barbara would bring, or I would bring, the tabletop bin that I would have or she would have on her kitchen counter, just so we would show people. Like, they go, well, how do you start doing this? What do you store your food waste in, and things like that. So we wanted to be a full service station, help people figure out what to do and how to do it and what's acceptable and what you do with it and what happens to it after I turn it into you, and just show them the whole picture. And Barbara, with her network, that's the advantage of having somebody that's been around a long time. She knew so many people that from the get-go, from that first Saturday, we had a good number of people bringing food waste. And since we were at the farmer's market and there were people there buying food and doing other things, it was pretty easy to recruit other people to start bringing their food waste if they had the inclination. And Barbara has a good story, maybe she'll tell later, about, we can convince people even if they don't have the inclination, if we talk to them enough. So,
Mary, you have a question, and
okay.
also Barbara, and that is, could you maybe give us a sense, an estimate of how many people would be using this per week, and maybe an estimate of how many people actually were making cash donations?
Sure. So I don't know how many make cash donations because we don't keep track of the number of people that put money in the jar, but we have made enough money to cover this the whole time. And so we've always made enough money. And Barbara mentioned, that we talk about the costs of the program, and all of us come up with our different way to talk about it. Like, my favorite way is to say, especially if it's somebody new, I say, it's amazing that this project is supported by all of us, because we're all volunteers and there are costs associated with it. We have to pay Black Bear, but we all, there are enough donations and support that this is self-sufficient. And so that's another way to get the message across, I think. And you asked about numbers, or someone asked about the number of people that bring food waste. And the numbers at the farmer's market are usually like 60 to 80 every Saturday. And then when we get to the winter compost station, the numbers are something like between 20 and 60. And it really is weather dependent.
And those are really households.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are households. So when going back to the fall, we were starting to collect waste and we weren't up to 60 or 80 people yet. And Barbara said that we needed the second bin though by October. And so we got up there pretty quickly. And then one Saturday before the winter market started, so we were still at the farmer's market, I was the lead and I went out and there was a mishap or miscommunication with Black Bear and they hadn't picked up the bins from the previous week. And it was like, oh no, we've got to do something about this now because people are going to be here really soon to bring other food waste. What are we going to do? And so we had to pivot a little bit. And so we did bring the other bins from last week over. And those things, as Barbara mentioned, are really heavy. And the food waste packs down over time, fortunately. And then I went home because I have a personal bin, one of the big ones too. And I didn't have much in it. So I dumped it out and brought it to the market. And we managed to get everything in those one empty bin and on top of the other bins. But it made me realize that already, this was after a few months, we had all these people that they depended on us. This was a service that was really important to them. And we built something and it was like, wow, we can't back off now. We have to be there on Saturdays because they're counting on us. And then Barbara's mentioned too that, we can't let this stop because food waste never stops. We're always going to have food waste. And so that was one reason we had to continue during the winter.
Mary, were there
Yes.
you have another question? Were there
Yep.
any restaurants or commercial establishments that were bringing waste, or was it all individual households?
Well, that's a really good point because it'd be great if the restaurants did, but we didn't think we could afford to take all the restaurant waste and all that. And so we didn't. And some of
And
them did bring it.
we actually did have somebody bringing that a couple of times from a B&B kind of place. And I told her I was sorry, but that we didn't have room because she brought so much.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't have room for all the other people if we allowed her to do it. And I suggested that maybe she might want to subscribe to Black Bear on her own, but I don't know if she ever did.
I think they did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah. So that's great. So then during the winter, we were there and we were not at the farmer's market. We are just across the street from the farmer's market in the Sunspots Pavilion parking lot that the owner graciously allows us to use. And this is a picture of some people bringing food waste. This was late 2019, early 2020. And it really became, a place where people just show up and socialize, especially when the weather's not bad. Just because it's good to see people again. And, our farmer's market closes in the end of November normally, unlike I know Lexington is open year round. And so, this is a place where people can go see their friends again. And so we didn't have the big setup that we had. Let me just go back. So here, we usually had a tent and we had these tables and we had lots of material. But then when we went to the winter compost station, there weren't a lot of strangers wandering around. And so we didn't bring all the promotional material. And it was not a great place for evangelizing, for talking to people and talking to them about composting. And then, as you all are aware, the pandemic occurred. And, if you think back to a year ago, we didn't know what was going on. And it was changing so quickly. And and I was thinking, okay, we can do this, and I was reading about social distancing. And so, okay, we'll do this and we'll social distance. And we had that compost station on March 14th and we had a great time and nobody social distanced. And I understand, it's not natural to do that. And it's still not natural sometimes, although I think after a year, we're getting more used to it. So it didn't work. We tried to do it, but people just kept getting together and then, there'd be too many people. And then they tried, we can't shake hands anymore. So we're going to do something like a booty bump and, other ways. And it was really social. And actually that was the time that Art Fovarg and Audrey Voers both of them from Harrisonburg were there. And it was great to see them. And we went out for coffee later because they have been really very helpful in all of this. And especially in the compost co-ops that we'll talk about in a little bit. But with the pandemic, change happened really quickly and we couldn't predict what would happen. So I was concerned that we couldn't social distance. I couldn't enforce it. I didn't really, we weren't wearing masks at that point. And so we had the compost station on March 14th, went home and I thought, okay, well, we'll try it again next week. But then the stay-at-home order came and we were all shut down. So everything was shut down. And then you remember, that shutdown lasted for a couple of months. And so the farmer's market didn't even open. Can you imagine? The farmer's market didn't even open. That was important. So, and also this food waste, we had a winter compost station because we got to take the food waste somewhere, right? And I did see people, or they call me and they'd say, well, I'm still saving it in the freezer. I've got it in the freezer and when you're open again, I'll bring it down. Or somebody told me they couldn't save it anymore. And it was like they had to throw it away and it was just awful. And that is awful. And so, that's a big deal. And what are we going to do about it? And so once again, we had to pivot. We had to figure out a way to do something because I didn't know how long this was going to happen. How long was the shutdown going to go on? I don't know. And so what we ended up doing was coming up with a drive-through compost station. And we worked with the city and were able to use the football stadium parking lot at Gypsy Hill Park. And it was open these Saturdays. We had a few I think 5 Saturdays where we were closed, and it opened again on April 25th and ran through May 23rd. And after May 23rd, the farmer's market opened again. And so we were able to go back there. And you can see a previous question about the number of households. So this compares the number of households to at the winter compost station to the drive-through. So there weren't nearly as many. Why not? I don't know. But that was a strange time because we pivoted quickly. We didn't know if it would work. We didn't know if people would come, but it's important. We realized that you can't, well, we can, but we didn't want to just stop. So if we could figure out a way to do this safely, then we felt that would be good. And doing it with this drive-through did make it safe. So nobody was standing very close. A car would drive up next to the bin and the car would stop and somebody would get out and put the food waste in the compost bin and then drive off. So one thing I've learned from all this, these past 18 months, and is that this project, if you start it, you can't stop, or you lose a lot of trust in the community. And so this has to continue. And you know what else? It's not just me. I don't have to continue. Barbara and I both moved on, but this is important enough so that Shenandoah Green is running it, of course, but there are all these people that want to keep it going. Next.
Okay, so this is what our compost station at the farmers market looks like when the farmers market is running. And you see there's people standing out front chatting, and that's always the case. This was pretty early. This was the first fall this picture was taken. And we had other things going on at the table. We always get different flyers of things that were happening with Shenandoah Green. And there was also a plastic collection that particular day, a bin where people could put certain plastics for recycling in. That was actually not a Shenandoah Green project, but we took it because we were helping somebody else that couldn't be there that day do that. And one of the things that I remembered as we were going through planning this presentation that was a lot of fun is that when Mary and I were both there, we weren't always both there every Saturday morning, but when we were, we just sort of assumed these different roles. I would always stay at the table, and if anybody walked by and even glanced towards the table, I would say, "Oh, hi, would you like to know what we're doing here? And can I explain to you, what this is all about?" And Mary, she'd have the stack of cards in her hand, and she'd be wandering around up and down the aisles of the farmers market and just cold calls, stop people and say, I want to tell you about something, I want to tell you what we're doing over there in that tent. It was just great because we just assumed these different roles and they both worked. And so the funny story that Mary wanted me to tell you was that at some point in the fall, there was an older, and I'm older, but they were even older couple that came up to the table, and they were not smiling. They were sort of scowling, looking. And I said, my regular spiel, can I tell you about what we're doing here? And told them, and still no smile or anything. And I said, well, you're interested? And they're just, no, we're not interested. It's like, well, okay, but just then I tried to just chat with them, just friendly, and don't have it. The next Saturday, they were there again, looking. By the third Saturday, the woman had some food waste to bring. And then I said, oh, you convinced your husband, because she was sort of on the line. He was very negative about it. She said, no, I didn't convince him, but we're doing it anyway. So, and it's just, there's all kinds of funny stories like that happen, but it was great. It just meeting so many different people and being able to share that kind of joy of doing something positive for the environment. And being there, I really loved coming every Saturday morning. It was fun, no matter the temperature, and setting up, and we were supported by a lot of the other vendors too, which was very nice. They would often tell people they would want to have some of the cards on their table and tell people what we were doing. And so anyway.
Barbara, you have a question in the chat.
Okay.
The question is, where do those yellow black bear bins, the big 65-gallon ones, where do they go when they're waiting for pickup?
Okay, well, fortunately, Sunspots Pavilion, which is across the way, they allow Shenandoah Green to keep those there during the week, and that's where, and they're bungeed short, closed, and you'll see a picture of that later on. And the black bear, there's a big truck that comes every week and empties them and then leaves a clean one there, or that process has changed a little bit how they do that, but that's how this went for the most part. Yeah.
You have another question now.
Yes.
Did you try any giveaways to encourage new participants? For example, take this container with you and fill it and bring it next time? Or I wondered about the bags themselves. Were the bags sold to the users?
No, they weren't. So we couldn't sell anything, but we had the bags, and we would, particularly people starting, we'd say, okay, let me give you, 5 bags, and this will get you through, a few weeks or whatever. And the bags were actually donated. I don't think that was ever part of our finances. I think they were all donated. And at that point, at least. And, but people, that was also an opportunity when you're counting out those bags. And we would say, well, even though we're a nonprofit, but we still have to pay for all of this to happen. It's not in our budget in terms of income. So we do need to, we accept donations every week. So that was how that was done. But we didn't have any other giveaways.
I will mention that one of our volunteers I think it was last summer, developed a tool that had the bags in it. And I wish I'd thought to bring one, but it is a piece of paper folded up very creatively, and on all the different sides of it, she put all the information about composting in Shenandoah Green, and inside it, she folded it up into an envelope, and inside it, we put 5 bags. And so if somebody's really gung-ho and thinks they want to do this, then we can give them one of these compost welcoming packages. And, it's a piece of paper with the 5 bags and some instructions. So another example of how our volunteers, and, what I'm finding, and like Barbara mentioned too, is that working together, we have so many volunteers, and just Barbara and my differences, we all have so much to contribute, and we learn so much from each other. So, and actually, I think that's an advantage of changing leadership too, because every leader brings new strengths. All right, so we've gone 18 months. Actually, let's go back. We've gone about 15 months. And last fall, we were thinking, okay, the winter compostation is coming and everything's good. And, of course, we're still wearing masks and all that. But, it was a little over a year. And I was thinking, well, what is success? How can we tell that we're successful? And, what about these people that are bringing us all this food waste? Is this good, or is this working for them? And they would thank us every week, and of course they brought their food waste, so that's one really good sign of success. But I thought, if we did a survey, we could learn a lot about our customers, about the participants in the program. And there were also some things coming up that made the survey important. So let me tell you about the survey we did. Okay. So we did a survey, and we did it for these 4 Saturdays in a row. And we wanted to learn about our participants. And we also wanted to gauge and grow interest in compost co-ops, which I'll talk about in a minute, and Shenandoah Green. And to remind the participants once again that there is a financial cost for this. And the other reason was to provide the compost station hours, because we knew that the hours were going to be changing a lot over the next couple of months. For instance, the farmers market typically closed after Thanksgiving, but last year there was also a winter market, yes, but the hours were different. And, so it was confusing. And how do we get that information out? And so you can see the survey on the right, and it was very simple. Basically, we asked how often people drop food waste off. And we asked, why do they bring us your food? Why do you bring us your food waste? And I don't know if you can read that, but all 3 reasons are viable. And so most people did choose all 3 reasons. And we asked if they'd be interested in volunteering, and would they be interested in signing up for Shenandoah Green emails. And then we just mentioned a little bit about the compost co-op. So if they wanted to learn more about that, then they left their information and I would send it to them. And then after they filled out the survey, you can see the bottom, it says tear here to save the information below. And that's where we talked about the changing hours. And so we wanted them to have something to take away with the changing hours. Of course, the changing hours were also on the website and other places, but we just thought it was important to give them something. And there was a little blurb about compost cooperatives again, and then also about the financial needs. So let me show you what we learned. So remember, this went for 4 weeks, and we had 97 food waste participants fill out the survey, and 2/3 of them said that they drop off food waste every Saturday. And if you'd asked me if I would have thought that that would be what would happen or the result, I would have said, no, we have a lot of different people every week, they're different. And I don't know if it's because I can't tell people, don't recognize people as easily because they're wearing masks, but this really surprised me, that 2/3 of them have built coming to the farmer's market to drop off food waste into their schedule for every week. That's amazing. And then this was interesting too, that 2/3 of them selected all 3 reasons, but others, really the main other response was to recycle my food waste into compost so it can continue as part of the ecosystem. And so from that, I thought, when I go out and talk to people about why we compost and what's important about compost, that this might be, if you're only going to give one reason, that this might be one thing to talk about, because that resonates with more people. And then some other things that we learned, or that we had, that were a result of this survey, were that we had 10 participants sign up for volunteering at the compost station. And, wow, 10 more people, that's incredible. 36 signed up for the Shenandoah Green email. And, from that, I went, oh boy, we really need to work, all of us as volunteers, to encourage people to sign up, because we have a clipboard. Barbara mentioned that, we would ask people if they wanted to sign up to be a volunteer or sign up for Shenandoah Green emails. But apparently, we had a lot more that signed up just with this survey. And then we had 18 people interested in learning more about compost co-ops. So it was great to learn all of this. And then thinking about it recently, I realized, okay, 97 food waste participants, and we have about 40 volunteers. So That's amazing. We have, if it's 97 households, really, we have a half to a third of those households also have a volunteer. And so people, like I keep saying, are really involved in this and they like what we're doing. Oh, and another question was, can we know, we put information here about finances and needing support. Can we gauge an increase in the donations after this? No, because everything was topsy-turvy with going to different places and the hours changing and all that. But it didn't hurt anything.
Got a couple more questions in the chat
Okay.
for you.
Good.
One person is asking, did most people compost their fruit and veg at home and just bring the other food waste? And maybe you could talk a little bit about what food waste you did take.
Sure. So we take any food waste. And so, often you ask people, I go up and say, what do you do with your food waste? And people look at me like, what are you doing? And it was funny. But we take any. Many people say, oh, well, I compost at home. And I go, oh, that's great. But you don't put meat and bones out there, do you? And some people say, yeah. I go, well, yeah, I do. And the wild animals come and get it. And I go, okay, that's fine. But if you want to bring your meat and bones and things that you wouldn't put in your backyard compost, we would be glad to take them. And we did have people that did that, but it looked to me like most people bring everything. So.
Then you've got a couple more, and this has to do with black bear.
Yes.
First of all, somebody asked if you could explain what black bear is, who black bear is again.
Yeah.
And then a couple follow-up questions after that. So start there.
Okay. So I have realized I took it for granted for a long time, but we couldn't do this without black bear. And we have it so easy. I mean, I took black bear for granted because they take the food waste. All we're doing is collecting it. Barbara has done a wonderful job of starting this. And, we have all done a wonderful job of keeping it going. But you know what? This is the low-hanging fruit. This is the easy part. The hard part is what Eric's doing. So black bear composting, what they do is they pick up food waste from around the area, and they have an industrial scale composting facility. And what you see out there is mountains of compost at different levels of decomposition. And they are very carefully maintained and monitored, and they turn them and they naturally heat to a very high temperature. And that destroys all the bacteria and breaks down all the bones and things like that. And so then they sell the compost from that. So if you don't have a black bear, if you don't have an industrial scale composter, gosh, it's a much bigger challenge. Yeah.
So the follow-up questions related to that are, let me see, what happens to the compost that black bear produces at their facility?
Yeah, so black bear sells it. And so they do give us some compost. I think we get, it depends, about a cubic yard a year for each compost bin, something like that. And so we have donated it to a school and things like that. And one of the compost co-ops that I'll talk about in a minute, they have decided that they want that compost. And so we'll be distributing it to them.
And then just in this vein, somebody asks, do you have any suggestions for Lexington about what we could do to start a composting station if black bear cannot serve our area? And then a sort of related comment is from someone is, if black bear can make money, why doesn't Lexington do this too? It's a good question.
We'll talk about some of this towards the end too. I think. Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah. And you know what it needs is some young entrepreneur like Eric Walter, and to just do it. But it's a hard row. It's not an easy business. So yeah, I think that's the real challenge for y'all.
Okay.
All right. So we've got the compost station. Everything's good. People are coming out on Saturday morning, and that's great. But what if what about those people that work on Saturday morning? Or what about, just don't want to go because I want to go play. And, I can save it for a couple of weeks, but it'd be nice to get it out of my house. And so thinking about that, and then I had been talking to Art and Audrey in Harrisonburg, and I knew about their system. And I talked to Susan Elliott in Charlottesville, and just was cogitating and incubating ideas for other ways to collect compost besides in person. And so in Harrisonburg, they have their compost bins right near the farmer's market, and they're there all the time, and they're open. And so somebody can just come and drop by and drop off their food waste. And that was an option. We could have done that, but our compost bins are in downtown Staunton. And we were afraid that if we did that we would get a lot of contamination. People would just use them as trash cans. And so that wasn't something that we wanted to deal with. And so I listened, and it turns out that Susan Elliott in Charlottesville, and she actually works for the city, they were doing a pilot subscription bin. And in one of the alleys, they have a black bear bin, and they use a bicycle cable and a combination lock. And you just call Susan and she'll give you the combination, and you can drop by anytime you want, open the bin and put your food waste in there. And so based on, the ideas that I'd been learning, I Googled and looked and did a lot of online research. Surely somebody is doing this, in the United States. And this was, a little over a year ago. And I found one company in Chicago called Block Bins. And what they are doing is exactly that. So they have bins that are shared, and you don't find the share. You just sign up with the company, and they give you a bin. And if you get more people, the cost goes down. And I talked to the owner of that, and he had just created it a few years ago, and it was making money and doing well. And we weren't going to do that because this is Chicago and we're Staunton. But could we adopt that model and adapt it to our place and do it? He developed the software to keep track of everything, and we can do it with an Excel spreadsheet until the project gets too big. Well, it hadn't gotten too big yet. So what we did is we developed the Shenandoah Green Compost Cooperatives. And so what we have is a group of subscribers, and they pay a small monthly fee so that they can access the bin anytime. And you can see this is the compost co-op that's at the Sunspots Pavilion parking lot. And just like the one in Charlottesville, we have a bicycle cable there, and it's got a combination lock. And so people pay about $5 a month, and they pay it in a lump sum, a big lump sum of $30 up front, so that they pay for the first 6 months ahead. And we figured out that if they paid that, that would make the project sustainable. That would cover the costs. And so far it has. And it covers the costs also, it covers the cost for Black Bear, and also the cost of the materials like the cable and the lock there. And we came up with the idea, and then we tested it at the compost station, and people seemed to like it. And then we announced it through a Shenandoah Green email, and there was a Google form there, and people signed up through the Google form. And we had, I think, 24 responses that they wanted to do this. And so that's what we set up last June. And right now we are in the second subscription period. And everybody from the first subscription period continued. So it's going very well. People like it. But the funny part is that, at the compost station, I see people and I can at least talk to them and judge if things are going well. Although we did do a survey because I wasn't sure. But with the compost co-op, I don't see these people. I do go by and check the bin, but I never saw them. And so I thought, how do we know if this is working or people are using it? And so I did another survey. And so we sent this 3 months into the 6-month subscription period. And once again, it was really simple because you want them to fill it out. So the questions were approximately how often do you add food waste to the locked compost bin? And it was not free form. There were choices you could answer. And then the other question was free form. Did you have any comments about your experience? And the amazing thing is, I don't know if y'all have ever done surveys, but when I did them back in my work life, you get 20 or 30%. These were people I knew back in my work life, 20% to 30% people responding. That was good. That was good. For this survey, everybody responded. Every single compost co-op member responded. And they said they use the bin about weekly. So that's great. Well, here's the interesting part is that all the comments. And, I put them all here, and I know this is ridiculous. You're not going to read all these, but most of them, they really are expressing appreciation for what we're doing. But then if you look closely, if I analyze them, then I can see that they're in different areas. And you look, what I did here is I highlighted some of the challenges. And like one says, I really don't need to use the lock bin. I've been coming on Saturdays anyway. I'm at the farmer's market, so I've just been dropping off my compost in. Because of the pandemic, I tend to bring my food waste in on Saturdays when I attend the farmer's market. And so I realized, well, the scientific validity of this survey is not very good because, it looks like people are possibly using the compost station, even though they have access to this bin anytime they want. So we couldn't separate that out. But you know what? It doesn't matter, because what's important is that people are getting rid of their food waste in a way that works for them. And that's what they really appreciate. And let me show you, a bigger challenge. This is a larger picture. There's the compost co-op bin that's labeled there on the left. And then there are two other bins right here. And those are the bins that we use at the compost station. This is where the bins are stored during the week. And so the Black Bear truck just drives up here and picks them up and dumps them out. And the farmer's market is just held across that street there. So if you've been to the compost station at the farmer's market, then you probably can find those bins pretty easily. And what we discovered is that, people were finding ways to get rid of their food waste, even if they couldn't do it on Saturdays. So they do add food waste here occasionally. They undo the bungee cord. And you know what? I don't really see that as a problem, except it violates the scientific validity of the survey. But that doesn't matter. The point is that they want to do the right thing. They want to deposit their food waste in the bin. So, and I said here, and what prevents anyone from opening the station bins and adding food waste anytime? Nothing. It does have that bungee cord. So I'm thinking, somebody that's a visitor to town and they've got a cup they just want to throw away, they probably wouldn't open this. And if they did open it, they'd see all this food waste in there probably and would not put it in there. We do have trash in there occasionally, but not very often. So it really has worked well.
Mary, there are a couple more questions, but I'm going to let you get through your
Okay.
slides because we're running close to time here. We've got about 5 more
no.
minutes.
I'm
So why
sorry,
don't
we're
you
running
finish,
over.
and then I'll ask the rest of the
Okay.
questions at the end.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I'm running over. So I'll just quickly go through these, and I will tell you, Barbara, I sent the slides with notes to Barbara, and so they are available, if you want a copy of the slides later. But what we found out also through the survey is that these co-op members bring up concerns, but they're dealing with it and they have ideas. And, so it's good that it's like we're co-op, we're co-members, we're all involved in this. And really, that's what we've seen with all of this all the way along. And so what we're doing now is we're expanding into neighborhoods. And we've got a bin in one neighborhood, and it's a captive audience. It's a townhome community. And so they just reached out through the HOA list. And so great, they've got one there. I'm convinced that we will have more compost cooperatives once the pandemic's over and people are more willing to get together and knock on doors and ask their neighbors. So another thing we've learned is that this really works well in conjunction with a compost station. So people are educated there, and then they have a compost bin, and there's less contamination that way. All right, Barbara.
Okay, so another option that there is, thanks to Black Bear composting in Staunton, is people have bins at their home. And that has nothing to do with Shenandoah Green, except that some people learned about that at the station. And but they wanted to be able to have a bin of their own, not just for food waste, but also for yard debris that can be composted. And some people share that with their next door neighbor, or some friends or whatever. Those are, Black Bear picks those up every other week. And here's a picture of somebody with their bin on their streets. They just come down the street and they put it out there, every 2 weeks for Black Bear to pick it up. So some of the things, just some statistics here, that we have already kept 12 tons of food waste out of the landfill in these 18 months, which that's a lot. The 40 volunteers that we mentioned, 140 emails, and there are 15 residential Black Bear bins now in the Staunton area. And there's also an option, you can get the 65-gallon one or a 5-gallon one. And the cost for those is about $25 a month. And Mary could tell you about the Mary Baldwin food waste.
So I won't say more, but if you're interested, just reach out to me about Mary Baldwin, because we've started a project, and like we found with the townspeople or the community members, people think this is important. And so at Mary Baldwin, there's a growing group, and they're going to make it happen. And I don't know if y'all are Lexington's a college town. There's some challenges right now. And so starting composting now, that's crazy, but they're doing it and it's going to work. It just is going to take some more time. So. Barbara?
Okay, so I think all of this is a very hopeful thing, because there are ways that this is growing in a lot of different areas. There is a restaurant here in Staunton that has actually been using Black Bear composting since before we started doing it, and they continue to do it, I believe. And there are a lot of schools throughout the country. It's just amazing when I start doing research, from preschools all the way through universities, that are composting, on their school campuses, or it might just be one classroom. There's a great story about a school in Waynesboro where the teacher just thought she just couldn't stand to see all the waste. And the teacher personally did the subscription with Black Bear composting so that they could pick up the waste there weekly at the elementary school. Hospitals are also composting. Black Bear serves both the UVA and Martha Jefferson hospitals in Charlottesville, collecting their food waste regularly. And there are other ones throughout the country, but it's just amazing to think that that's happening so close to us. UVA University, there's bins around the university, as well as the small 5-gallon ones in different places for students to put their food waste. And throughout the country, some of the towns, the local governments are actually using the area landfill. So that goes back to the question that someone asked, what can be done in your area? And so if citizens band together and work towards this and convince your local government that this is a very important thing to be doing, landfills can be, usually they have equipment that can be done, and they just really need the training of how to go about this, because the compost has to be tested by the FDA and all before it can be sold or distributed, to make sure there's no E. coli in it. And but Eric Walter, who owns Black Bear Composting, is glad to talk to anyone in your area that might be interested in making this happen down there. He can't do it himself, but he's glad to pass on his knowledge. So it's interesting that there are grocery stores around here, and I'm not gonna go into a lot of detail. Food Lion is not the grocery store that I normally go to very much at all, but I did go in there at one point last year and asked them what they were doing in terms of food waste. And because compost it's part of a whole issue of food recovery to keep food from being wasted. So Food Lion's a good example of what they do about that for their fresh produce. The first thing they do, if anything is still, that cannot be put out anymore, but is still edible, it goes to the food bank, our local food bank. And then if there are things that are actually food waste and have to be disposed of, they don't throw them, they don't go to the landfill. They, as the manager told me, he said, there's a big truck, a big semi that comes once a week, and all the food waste goes in there. And he said, and it's made into some kind of dirt, which was compost, but he wasn't familiar with compost. But it was great, you know. But he was so proud of it. And I did some research online about Food Lion, and they're the only company that for 19 years in a row has been awarded the Energy Star for their sustainability, because they're working towards trying to be a totally zero waste store. And he showed me the few things, and there's.
Oops.
Uh-oh.
Barbara has frozen. Barbara, you've frozen mid-sentence. Mary?
Shall I just continue?
Well, she'll probably get unfrozen at some point.
Yeah.
But we do have, do you want to wrap up and then take some of these questions? Do you have a few more
Sure.
minutes? We're at 8
Yeah.
o'clock now. So
Right. So we're just wrapping. Let me just finish this. I think we've got these two more slides.
okay.
So, you know, we've been talking about the past 18 months and everything, and that we've collected so many tons of food waste, and we've done a remarkable job. But that's not true. It's we, if I talk about we, everybody, the community. And but you think about it on a more personal level, I'm not talking about the data, but I'm talking about the emotions and the feelings behind this. You know, this project has become really important to the community. And here's some reasons that we know why we know this. And what we realized is that donating food waste builds community, and that this project is so important that the participants are going to make sure it works. They are going to do what it takes to keep it going. And, you know, I don't think any of us, when we got involved, we didn't get involved for these reasons. We got involved because we wanted to keep the food waste out of the landfill. But this side benefit is something that really is incredible, because it is really building community and building social capital. And so we'll end with this anecdote from a volunteer. She said, I often feel overwhelmed by the big issues facing our society and our world. Collecting and bringing my food waste to the farmer's market is one way I can make a difference. It gives me a feeling of hope and encourages me to look for other ways I can contribute. And wow, you know, that's what we need. We need people to believe in this and to do more. And so that's why I think this project is so important, because it can spawn other projects. So thank you all for your attention. I'm sorry we ran over.
No, not at all. Thank you. If you have a few more minutes, and
Sure.
mind, we do just have a few more questions.
I'd be glad to.
Okay, and
All
then
right.
if anybody does need to go, please feel free to do that.
Yeah.
We will have this session recorded and posted on the website, so you'll be able to catch the tail end at another time if you do need to leave. But let me see here. Somebody makes the comment, first of all, that Washington and Lee here in Lexington does already compost, and they use that compost on their own gardens.
Yeah.
Another person comments that Alexandria has a program that participants get back compost, and wonders if that's part of Black Bear's offerings for the folks who contract directly with them. Or
it is.
Yes, it is. The residential.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Let me see. Then here's a question again involving Black Bear. Do participants get a discount from Black Bear, or has there been some sort of negotiation with Black Bear about pricing?
No.
Not from my end. And talking to him with Mary Baldwin, I don't think he does that. Okay. I don't think he negotiates repricing. He's got a pricing, and that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And then you mentioned some of the hopes for the future. And this person is wondering, have you tried yet placing food waste bins at some of these common destinations like supermarket parking lots?
We have not. And I think the answer there, the reason is that it would require education. And almost like the bell ringer, you've got to have a person there. You can't just leave it there because it would just fill with trash. And so I can imagine doing that at some time, but it would require education too. So yeah, that would be ideal.
Could you comment on that nifty little machine that you had, I think in your previous slide,
Oh,
with the
sure.
card reader?
Yes. Yeah, I found this and the information about it, the Better Earth Logistics, and I put a link in the notes. And this is something new that was created this year. So there's this company in the Midwest, and this is a community compost kiosk, as it says. And what it does is it has that card reader, and you buy you put money on your card, you bring your food waste, use your card with a card reader, then that door opens, you put your food waste in, and they have trucks that come pick it up, just like Eric. So they wanted a standalone kind of a subscription bin, and they had to design it. And so I've contacted them, and they are very, very busy with talking to everybody that is interested in these. But I think, that's the way of the future, potentially. Yeah, and actually put one at the grocery store, because only people that have been educated could use it. So.
We have a couple more comments here. Somebody comments that Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, has had an industrial composter for years and provides the link. Somebody else is providing the link to Black Bear Composting. And I will save all this chat with the links, and that will be included in what we post online for the other folks who are attending tonight who would want to have these links to websites. Let me see. Okay, and we're going to post the slides, and let me see. Here's the last one. Have you ever talked with Black Bear about bringing a truckload of their compost to the farmer's market to actually sell or give away at the market?
Yeah. Barbara, you want to take that one?
Yeah, no, that's never, and it would be hard because the way when they sell it, can you hear me? Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. When the way they sell it, well, he has quite a schedule for one thing in terms of picking up, but they do it by a cubic yard. So they actually, use their dump truck kind of thing and give you a cubic yard at a time, and weigh it on their scales and all of that kind of thing. So that would be real hard to do in the farmer's market, impossible.
Okay. Let me see. I think that does it for the comments that I see here. And so I'll turn it back over to Cliff Kirikoff. Cliff, are you here? Uh-oh. Did we lose Cliff?
Uh-oh.
Cliff, we're not hearing you. Are you muted maybe? No, maybe we've lost him as well. Well, I will then thank you both profusely for this wonderful, inspiring talk and example. I'm just sort of drooling at the possibilities that we might be able to do something here with our landfill or some other way that we could work out a similar system, without Black Bear, unfortunately. A few of us did go and tour their site recently, and we tried mightily to twist Eric's arm, but he wasn't budging. So we may have to come up with a more creative solution here, and maybe to involve our landfill or working with some of the other farms that are already composting in the area. So thank you all very, very much. Again, we will have a talk next month on the second Wednesday at 7 for those of you who are following. And that talk will be about plastics and plastic recycling. So stay tuned for information about that. And thank you all again for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. We enjoyed it.
Yes.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good
Good night.
night.